Hello, Denis Fedorov here. In this video, we are going to speak about declension. If you ask me what this declension has to do with Russian cases, my answer will be everything. When beginners say a phrase like Russian cases, or when they say that Russian cases are insanely difficult, they actually mean a declension. So not the cases are hard for them, but a declension. And today we are going to discuss this process of Russian declension because declension is actually the main thing about Russian cases. Okay, before we've discussed that the main difference between the Russian and the English languages, except for the writing system, is that the Russian language is a kind of a language where the words themselves are very flexible and changeable. So while English mostly relies on a word order and prepositions to convey thoughts, Russian mostly relies on words themselves because thanks to their flexibility and alterability, they can convey different contexts. So the Russian language is a language of a word alteration, and declension is a crucial part of it. Declension basically means changing of a form of the word in number, plural and singular forms, case. Six cases represent like six situations, or gender, masculine, feminine, and neuter. When you change at least one of these characteristics, it means you are declining a word. Of course, you can change more than one characteristic. In English, the system of declensions is simple compared to Russian so much that the term declension is rarely applied to English in practice. So in the great English language, when we want to learn about this declension, we'll see such shamefully simple declension tables like this one. Not good for such a great language. But in the high and mighty Russian language, we see much more beautiful and vast declension tables. Look at how beautiful they might look. What you see here is just a one single word but declined, which means that just one word can have such a lot of variants, which helps for just one word to convey slightly different meanings and to describe different situations. Of course, this is a feeble Russian example because it's a noun you see here, and Russian nouns do not decline in gender. Obviously, their gender is a constant, but only in case and number. So if we take an adjective which does decline in gender, we get a little bit more beautiful table. So in each of both variants, you see just a one word but declined. And as you see, a case is just a part, the most important but still a part of this declension mechanism. Except for the case, there is a grammatical number and sometimes also a gender. It may seem a bit daunting for you to see all this beautiful variety, but the thing is that all this declension stuff is not that hard as it may seem from the first look. As you see, the words themselves in both examples have changed very insignificantly. Their stem stayed the same, and only endings got altered. Also, for all these transformations, there are patterns which are called rules. So all these endings, they do not change chaotically, and words don't just get some random endings. They change according to rules, and there are only some certain limited number of endings that can be applied. All these can be learned, then trained, and then a declension skill can be developed. The human brain is a very capable instrument in its own way, sometimes even as capable as the stomach. So students are able to handle this declension mechanism. It's doable, and the world is full of examples of those many students who actually learned Russian and therefore this declension mechanism. Okay, this declension which we are discussing today is a very important part of a Russian word alteration. Declension is basically changing the form of the word in number, plural and singular forms, a case. Six cases represent like six situations, or a gender, masculine, feminine, neuter. And an important moment is that not all the parts of speech can be declined, which is again, so you would remember to change a case, number, or a gender, but only nouns, pronouns, adjectives, numerals, and participles. So verbs are not in this list and they cannot be declined, but they alter to, and it's called conjugation. And nouns, pronouns, and adjectives in this list are the most important. You should master them first and can forget about numerals and participles for a long while if you want to start speaking some Russian as soon as possible. And inside this list, adjectives are of a less importance. So declension is a word alteration for nouns, pronouns, adjectives, numerals, and participles. So when you take a word from any of these parts of speech and change at least one of its characteristics, a case, a gender, a number, you're declining it. It can be just one or two of these characteristics you change. That is declension. And an important moment to say here would be that a noun, which is the main part of speech in declension or cases learning, nouns do not change in gender. Noun is the main part of speech because you face it the first in the beginner's grammar and get and learn this declension mechanism mostly in the nouns unit. So as for gender, nouns have a constant gender. So declension for nouns is about altering them only between singular and plural forms and between 6 cases, like from nominative singular to genitive plural, for example. So, in order to make you remember, I am saying once more that that declension is a changing of the form of a word, which means 2 grammatical numbers, singular and plural, 3 grammatical genders, masculine, feminine, and neuter, and 6 grammatical cases. Declension means altering the word between all or any of these characteristics. Yes, this often gives more than a dozen of spelling combinations for most of the words, but it also brings a grammatical agreement within a sentence which reduces a role of a preposition and a role of a word order. So, what this declension has to do with Russian cases? And as I've said before, everything. Actually, cases are just a part of declension, one of the components. Actually, 6 of the components of declension because there are 6 cases. But also there are 2 number components, which are singular and plural forms, and 3 gender components. And by the way, in the plural form, there are no such thing as a gender. So gender is a term for singular form only. So mixing these components to cook a delicious declension soup, we have mathematically 24 possible variations of components to mix in it. It's a maximum possible theoretical number for like adjectives because, as I said before, nouns, gender cannot be changed. However, in practice, things are not that bad, and we usually have a bit more than a dozen of combinations for a word because endings may repeat themselves. So, because these series of videos is about cases, even the title says so, and because cases are the most important part of this declension, let's remember the basic characteristics of a case. The nominative case is the default case, the subject case. So the words listed in dictionaries are in this case. It basically shows us who or what is performing the action of a verb, the main acting figure. The accusative case is the direct object case. So the accusative case basically shows us the person or thing that has an action done directly to it. The genitive case is like a possessive case and is basically a Russian way of saying of, or this s with apostrophe, like in a brother's car. We do not have a preposition of in Russian, neither we have an analogy for this s with apostrophe in Russian. The dative case is a case corresponding to English preposition to. The dative case shows us the indirect object, the person or thing that is shown, told, something. The instrumental case denotes an instrument used in an action, so the instrumental case is used to describe the means by which the action is performed. For example, by playing with a pen, or to describe accompanying stuff, but also in this with context, like with a friend. The prepositional case is used with many common prepositions such as in, on, at, and generally used to indicate position. I am giving you a fast overview because in the later videos we'll discuss cases in detail. In this list of cases, the first nominative case does never have a preposition because it represents the subject. The last prepositional case, as you can obviously see from its name, is never used without a preposition, and the cases between them can either have a preposition or may not have it. Also, this overview of cases was not about all the situations each of the cases is used. It was a bird's eye look. Generally, if we speak about the basic and the main situations for each case, we'll get the following numbers. The nominative case is the main one. This is the default dictionary case, which is used in roughly 50% of situations, and in other 50% other cases altogether are used. And the nominative case itself can be described with 8 main, the most important situations it is used in. As for the other cases, the genitive case has 6 main situations or characteristics. Dative has 4, accusative has 5, instrumental has 4, and prepositional has 3. And by working and training with these most common situations, which I'll give you later in this series, you will be able to identify the needed case in most situations you appear in. Because this is usually an issue to properly choose a case. And actually, as you see from these numbers, they are not insane. Really, these numbers are not that big. So these were the cases which are the most important part of this declension mechanism. But don't forget that there are also a grammatical number, singular and plural forms, and a grammatical gender, masculine, feminine, and neuter. And they all together form this declension, which means they directly influence cases and each other. So, how declension is done in Russian? Generally, the mechanism is looking quite simple. We take a word in the nominative case singular form. This is the default form and the default case used in the dictionaries. So we take a word in its default form. We decide, we decide what we need to do to change a form into plural, or to change a case, or do both, or change a gender, maybe. Third, we do this change by altering the ending of the word to fit its new form, according to a rule. An example is always better than talk. Let's take a noun, which is the main part of speech in this situation, because it's the first in the learning process when the concept of cases is entirely new for you. On the screen you see a declension rule. Let's take a rule, for example, for the dative case. For other cases, this rule will look similar, but just other variants of endings will be filled into these cells. So there are like 2 sets of rules for each case because, as we talked before, all this cases stuff is not only about cases, but also about a gender and a number. So the dative singular rule will look this way. And for the plural form, as there are no genders in plural form, the rule looks this humiliatingly simple. So we take a singular form, which is a bit harder. First, what you see is that we take a word in its default form, the nominative singular. That's what we always do, even for the plural form. That's where we start off. Then, as you can see, Russian words do not just end in some random chaotic manner, but they follow patterns, so they are allowed to end this way, only in some certain letters. These endings belong to masculine gender, these to feminine, these to neuter. So the gender in Russian is decided via looking at the last letter of the word. So yes, that's how we do things. In Russian, we have slightly different approach to genders. So how the word ends directly influences its gender. So like the planet, planeta, will be she because it ends in a, and city, город, will be he as it ends with a consonant. This gender stuff deserves a special video, which I'm going to create, but actually this channel already has some very old videos which can still excellently explain this stuff. Okay, let's get back to declension. Russian words do not just end in some random chaotic manner, but they follow patterns, so they are allowed to end this way only in some certain letters. These endings belong to masculine gender, these to feminine, these to neuter. And then, depending on the ending in the nominative singular, we perform an action described here, which is ending alteration. So, the dative case is a case corresponding to English preposition to. The dative case shows us the indirect object. So, let's choose this to context and several examples. Друг, friend. Я пойду к другу. I will go to a friend. Друг ends in a consonant, which means it has this masculine gender. So we add u and get другу. That's how we go dative for this word. Герой, hero. Президент вручил медаль герою. The president gave a medal to the hero. It ends in I краткая, so the word has a masculine gender, so as per rule we remove I краткая and add U and get this герою. Mama, mom. Я покажу это маме. I'll show this to mom. We remove a and add ye and get mame. So again, we take a noun, it's in its default dictionary form, which is a nominative singular. Choose a destination, case, and number, and then we look at the words ending and change the ending according to a rule. Now that's the mechanism. However, if to look at this process of declension a bit broader, the ending changing will that I've shown you is not the only thing that happens in practice, but it's the main thing, of course. So globally, declension is done via three ways. First, changing the ending of a word. That's the most common variant. I've just shown you how we do it. You change an ending according to a rule. To learn to do this, you exercise to apply rules for all cases until you develop a skill. It's not that hard, but just takes quite a lot of exercising, time investment. Second, transformation of the word itself. It's a less common variant. It is used for some certain situations like pronouns and in some way for irregulars. To do this, you simply memorize this stuff. Basically, this way is not about the rules. A typical example will be personal pronouns, so you memorize their forms without any rules. Here is how they look. Third, let the word stay in its original form, the least common variant. The thing is that some nouns borrowed into Russian from other languages are indeclinable, so they do not obey Russian grammatical rules and never change their endings regardless of the grammar of the sentence. Like такси, меню, метро, пальто, радио, кофе, кино. These were the most common examples for the indeclinable foreign words, and they behave according to a pattern that is very similar to English. They simply stay in the original form no matter what. But for you not to get confused, other foreign words will act like native ones, like London, computer, internet. and many other words that change their endings according to Russian rules. So, as for these indeclinable words, you memorize them as indeclinable and then use them almost the same way as in English. So, this all will be about memorization. Probably you wish all the words would be indeclinable, but the most common variant is the first one, which is ending changing, and it's like a default variant. So, like a full definition, declension basically means changing endings or word alteration for nouns, pronouns, numerals, participles, and adjectives in a case, number, or gender. And to start speaking as fast as possible, you must first learn only how to decline adjectives, nouns, and pronouns, especially nouns, the most important pronouns like personal, and few most common adjectives. The other stuff is not that important in the beginning. So, a conclusion. Declension is the process by which nouns, pronouns, adjectives, and numerals change their forms to alter their syntactical meaning. So, it's the process of this word alteration we mentioned before. And declension is the main part of the beginner's Russian grammar, which is a kind of grammar you need to start speaking Russian. Declension means a transformation of the word in a case, a form, or a gender. And it's important to understand that this thing, which people call cases, is a declension, and it includes not only cases but also a gender and a number. Nouns, the main part of speech in terms of declension, can be declined in case and number, plural and singular, while adjectives and many pronouns can also change their gender depending on the noun they describe. As for the procedure, declension is done mostly by changing endings. So when you change a case, you change an ending of the word. When you change a form from singular to plural, you also change endings. When changing gender, you change endings. So basically, declension is changing endings. But sometimes it can also be in transformation of the word in a way like English: I, me, my, mine, we, us, our, ours. But for most of words, declension is still changing endings. So to learn cases means to study declension, which we are going to do in further videos. So that's it for the video. Thank you and see you later.